Hey there, in this tutorial, I want to show you how to do this written on text effect, which is completely procedural. You could type whatever you want. It could be offensive. It could ruin your relationship with your parents. But also it's, completely dynamic in the sense that you can pick a font, a speed, a style, stuff like this. So I'm thinking let's just get into it. I'm tired of explaining like a 3-minute setup just for a tutorial. So let's just do it. Blender 3.1 alpha. We are moving up. Just pick a version of Blender that's kind of recent, probably past 2.93. In geometry nodes, here's what we're going to do. This is going to be a completely geometry nodes effect. We're going to have some text. We're going to turn it into a curve. And once it's a curve, we have a bunch of nodes to deal with that, long story short. So starting off, we want text. So we do string to curves, which is the only node in existence that does that. So what this does is we put in a string, it makes it a curve. So let's do something like subscribe. Not enough people are subscribing, so I thought, you know what, let's make a whole brainwashing tutorial. You're my bitch for this tutorial, okay? You are gonna watch obediently and subscribe. So we have text. Let's just do some basic stuff. I want to center it. I also want to center the height. And at this point, anything that we type in is going to, follow that rule. Beautiful. So now this is a curve. Now the question is, how do we do the right on effect? Well, it's actually kind of interesting the way you do it. It's actually by deleting geometry. By deleting some of these points, it's going to somehow, because of a vertex order or something like that, it's going to actually write it on. So we have strings to curves. You're going to notice if we look at this through the viewer with the spreadsheet information, this is all just a bunch of instances. I think one instance for every letter. Which is fine, except it's totally not. So go to realize instances. We want to do this to convert this into just raw data. You see, now we have 101 control points. This is like the number of vertices that make up this curve in some sense, or control points. Make sure you realize instances or this will not work. And then all we need to do is delete geometry. And because the vertex order goes from left to right, it's going to work. So we're going to delete geometry. What geometry do we want to delete? Well, only some of it, and we want to control which some of it. So I'm going to take the index. Again, the index is basically this number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the number of each control point or vertex. God damn it. I was in the train station and I saw a bunch of science ads, come join our company. We are building the future. And they're all called vortex or the capsule, or shit like that. So that's on my mind. Either way, take index. We're saying we're only going to keep the indices that are bigger than some number. So let's say greater than whatever. Put it in the selection. And now you can see the bigger we make this, it's writing from left to right. Because when this is 0, it's saying what things are greater than 0, nothing. And then as we proceed, it's going through the vertices, okay? So that's the idea here. Now, the issue with this is we don't really know the maximum number of vertices. I mean, we do if we look at this, but if we just change the font, it might change it. If we change the number of letters, it might change it. So we need to somehow know what the biggest number this can be is. And it turns out this is easy. What you want to do, attribute statistic. This is going to give us statistics. I'm sorry, boys, but back to stats. It's going to give us stats about a certain attribute. So I'm going to send in our curve geometry. That's a text. And we want to say, give me information about the index. So we're saying attribute index for this geometry. We want to know what the maximum is. In other words, what's the largest index? How far down the list does this go? Does this make sense? I think it should. So I'm going to use this maximum. I'm going to multiply it. Why am I multiplying it? Because this is going to be our animation thing. Because I also don't want to do any keyframing. I want it to be completely procedural. So if I connect this here, you're going to see that when this is 0, we have nothing. And as we progress all the way to 1, it's going to write everything because we're going from 0 to 1, multiplying the maximum. So when it's 1, we have a full maximum. When it's 0, we have 0. So now we have a nice 0 to 1 thing. To make sure that we don't have to animate anything, I'm just going to use a driver. I saw this in a live stream comment recently that they too noticed that I explained this hash frame divided by number a million times. And I know, it's a fucking curse. All I'm doing here is I'm making an expression, hash frame, what I typed in before, just gives us the frame number, divided by 60 makes it 60 times slower. So, well, that didn't seem to work. I think I need to redo the driver since I wrote it twice. Hash frame. There we go. So you can see it's writing at this speed, or if we make this a bigger number, 120, it's going to be twice as slow because it's going to take 120 frames. So think of this number as the number of frames to perform the effect. Okay, so now we have a nice write-on effect. This is something that, at this point, it's kind of like set up in the sense that, we changed the font, it's going to work. Let's just pick a nice one since we're going to be stuck with this for a while. So I like the look of this one. We could also change the spacing. All this kind of derives from this. By the way, let's just do a save. Again, this whole tutorial is just a vehicle to get you to subscribe, so let's just call it that. Okay, we have this. If you were to look at this through rendered view, though, without any overlays, you're not going to see anything because it's just a curve. It doesn't have any thickness. So what I want to do with this is after we delete it, in other words, the write-on effect, I just want to turn this back into a mesh. So curve to mesh. It's so convenient that you can go back and forth. So with curve to mesh, we have the option of using a contour curve. In this case, a circle, which I'm going to make tiny. And now you can actually see what's going on here. We don't need that much resolution. Bring the radius down until it's not too thick. And now you can actually see this write-on effect as actual geometry. Okay, so this is technically done, but it doesn't look good in any way, and it doesn't have this kind of like, I don't know, almost organic look to it. By the way, I just want to mention, we could also resample this, and this is actually a great point. You're going to notice that from frame to frame, it's kind of a very harsh movement as it's like writing on, kind of like we're sewing it on. It can make this look very quick, especially at the last letter of the E. So what you might want to consider, especially now since we've done this attribute statistic, is you could totally resample the curve or do whatever you want to it, and it's still going to work, as you can see. So it took the same amount of time, this time with only 10 vertices per spline, I think. So if you make this 50, it's going to be higher resolution, but if we make this like 1,000, it's going to write on super, super smooth, which may or may not be what you want. So again, we can control the resolution of this in some sense, which can make it look more fun to look at. So I'm just going to do 300 or something like this. Now we just want to make it look fun. So one thing we can do is let's make it look a bit more random. So before we do any of this deleting, let's do a bit of a distortion. So I'm going to set position. In other words, I'm going to move the vertices that we are going to be deleting. I'm going to move them how? Using a noise function to make it a bit random. Good way to do this is you take noise, you take position, and you mix them. So I'm going to take the original position of the vertices and mix it, in other words, have a contribution of randomness. And let's see what that looks like. So I just set this to the position. Well, that's something. I think you want to set this to linear light, just like in shader nodes. This will keep the effect centered. So you can see, okay, we're adding some randomness. And now we just want to control that randomness. So for example, scale, bring it down. That way it's kind of like a more of a low frequency kind of thing. And also in the noise, I'm going to make it 4-dimensional, do another expression, hash frame divided by 100. Will evolve. As you can see, it's kind of pulsating a little. It's going to evolve it over time, but I want it to be a bit faster. And this will also make it feel more organic, like we have letters in the abyss kind of thing. So already it's looking a bit more stylized. The more you do this, the more intense this is going to be. So you just want to pick what feels right to you. I want it to be kind of like floating in the water kind of thing. So I think this looks pretty good. Another thing we can do is we also want to fill in the letters, not just have the contours. And if we have it do that with a bit of a delay, I think that would be interesting. So really, it's the same kind of setup. We want to delete the geometry, but instead of curve to mesh, we want to do a curve fill. So we kind of need a second chain here. To do this, I would just kind of use the same chain, although we want one to be delayed relative to the other. So I'm just going to use another delete geometry. So now there are 2 branches for this. For this one, we're going to use a different greater than, which is still going to be the same idea. It's going to be the index. When is it greater than this like maximum thing, which I'm going to make a separate function for, right? It's the same thing. The only difference is for this one, and I'll explain everything I'm doing in a second. For this one, I'm just going to delay it a little. So I'm just going to add a small negative number, like negative 0.1. So the only difference between the main chain and the new chain is this time function has a bit of an offset, which is now going to its own multiply node, going here. Oh, by the way, this should not be mean. You should have mentioned it. It should be. Oh, no, it just looked like it was mean. Never mind. The only difference is there's a time delay. Everything else is the same. So if we were to look at it through this version, let's see what this looks like. It's the same thing. There's still the distortion, but now it's filling instead of contouring. And now if we join these, we're going to have both of them. One should come before the other. As you can see, it's writing, and then it's doing the filling. And let's see what this looks like at speed. Okay, it looks pretty good. And this is especially where the resampling matters a lot, because the fill is very sensitive to this. So let's look at some different results. So that looks hella sharp. Maybe that's what you want. We had 300. Let's do 1,000. This is going to give us a nice, smooth kind of thing. But I guess it does kind of go too slowly, not at real time. So this should be fine. There we go. Final thing. So at this point, you could literally change the text to anything, and it will do the same thing. We can control the speed using this number. We can control the text using this text box. Again, we want you to subscribe, so let's put that back there. You could control all this, but for now, let's just kind of finish off with some shading. So, shader editor, find it. Beautiful. I'm going to make 2 materials. I'm going to call one outline, and I'm going to make another material. It could be another material slot. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to call the second one fill. For the outline material, I just want it to be kind of like, I don't know, just white. So I'm just going to have it emission white 1. And for the fill, I want it to be kind of, well, you could do it transparent, or because I'm just going to do this against a black background, like that, I'm just going to make it kind of like this darkish gray. So now to include these materials, I want the contour, the outline is probably the word I should have been saying. We want this one to set material to the outline, and we want the other one to set material not to that, but to the fill. So now we can actually control this and see what it's doing. So, and we can also give it a hint of color. It's a little hard to see, but this is a bit red. One thing I'm noticing, though, is I think the outline is a bit too thick for my liking. I know. Only man in here who doesn't like thickness. But we can thin it out like that. And that already looks a bit better. I want to change the fill color a little, maybe like a subtle green. There we go. It's still too thick. Let's keep bringing it down until I like the look of it. But that's the nice thing about this procedural effect. You can literally just do whatever. Okay, so that looks good. You can change the color. You can do whatever. Let's just do a bit of testing to make sure everything works. What's a good sentence fragment I can use? Let's do Midnight Library. Burp my way through that one. Reason for Midnight Libraries. I'm reading that book. It got recommended to me, and it's actually fairly good. So if it's slowing down at the end, that is literally just lag. So we can just bring down the vertex count, see what that looks like. There we go. So it looks like a super nice, super cool organic effect. You could also do something with like, multiple lines of text, obviously, but whatever. That's the look. Let's try one more font. I mean, that's basically the same font, whatever. You get the idea. So at this point, I think I've taught the whole thing. You can see how it progresses from here. So beyond subscribing, there's a second thing I need you to do. I know I'm asking a lot from you today. Patreon, it exists. You can get the blend file for this. I'm going to make it nice and convenient and like put parameters so you can like use it. I'm going to put the blend up there, but in general, when you join Patreon, by the way, thank you to all 700 some active patrons. You guys are funding both channels. You get access to any blend I've ever uploaded. It is literally hundreds of projects at this point, and sometimes like full project files with like video that's motion tracked and all that. Check it out. There's blends. There's also early access to tutorials, so you could have seen this one early. Only early because I want it to still be available to everybody for free, but you could watch it early. I also occasionally make exclusive tutorials about just little extra projects or extra explanation, stuff like that. So if any of this interests you, or you just want to support either of the channels, this one or CG Matter, regardless of whether or not you want benefits, Patreon is literally the best way to do it. It is the most direct way you can help these channels, and I would greatly appreciate it, but also live your life and make your own choices. So hopefully you learned something. I know I did, and I'll see you.